Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to an episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and for those long-term listeners, you will know that I've not had a guest on for a while. It's been a scheduling issue on my part, been very, very busy. However, I'm delighted today to have a fantastic guest who I know is going to add some real value for you today. So my guest today is Vera, who is a holistic life coach who uses a powerful triad of yoga, mindfulness, and coaching to help people choose and create the life they want. So Vera, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
I know this is going to be a really good conversation because we spoke off air. Admittedly, it was a while ago. But when we're having this conversation, your energy is fantastic. Your authenticity and the way you were showing up the conversation was absolutely brilliant. So can we just take my audience back to what started you out on this journey? What was your life like? Because for me, I feel like in the coaching space, sometimes these prospective clients or current clients see us for how we are, and they think that that's how life always was. So what was life like for you growing up, and what was your journey like through this sort of like coaching pathway?
Yeah, I grew up, I was born in the 80s. So when I was growing up, there wasn't a huge Asian population in the suburb that I live in. So I always felt just really awkward. Like people made fun of my food. If I had them over, they were like, your family's weird. Because it's just like, it was unusual. Everyone was white, right? And so I think I always carried that feeling of I'm different. I don't quite fit in. I don't quite belong. And so I need to adjust myself accordingly if I'm to be accepted. And then when I was a teenager, I was just so painfully awkward. I would go to the high school library to eat my lunch and, read and do homework. I just didn't have a lot of friends. And then I saw all these people like, how teenagers congregate in the hallways, like the Poplar crew and stuff like that. And they'd be like all laughing and talking loudly and bragging about the party that they had just been to the past weekend. And I would always think, oh, I want that. And so when I finished high school and I started university, I had a little bit more freedom. My family's quite traditional Chinese. So I was very kind of protected and like I would say overprotected until I was an adult. And then one summer I decided to just go to Ireland to get some life experience and live on my own. And that is where I discovered the joys of drinking.
How old were you when you went over there?
It was a summer that I was about to turn 20. So I was 19, about to turn 20.
So again, I used to go to university in America, and it's something that I always say is that the American culture around alcohol, again, America, Canada, because of the sort of the drinking age, is very, very different. So actually, when you go somewhere like Ireland, there's got like a massive drinking culture. And it's like a bit of a shock.
Yeah. And it was such the norm that you're like, why wouldn't I? Like, it was just everywhere all the time, and everybody did it. And it brought me out of my shell. Like, I was instantly chatty and I wasn't afraid to say things which made me more witty or like more edgy. And so I was like, okay, this is like the best tool ever. I'm always going to use it because I'm actually very naturally introverted. And so, yeah, that was the summer that I got really into drinking, and then I got introduced to ecstasy and cocaine as well. So by the time I came home, I felt like a different person. Like I was like, I have seen what the world has to offer. And I ended up dropping out of university. And I was like, yeah, like I don't want to keep living this life that doesn't feel right now that I had a taste of what authenticity could feel like, or what I thought was authenticity. So I went to film school, kind of worked in film a little bit, but the recession hit and I ended up just getting a job at an office, and I ended up working there for 9 years while supporting my husband through school. We weren't married at the time, but we were young, we were in our 20s, and I didn't think without a university education, I just didn't think I was worth a better job or a
Mm.
job that interested me. And because I was so bored, I would just like drink after work. And also because I wasn't that happy with my life. So I drank heavily. I drank a lot of whiskey. I did a lot of coke. I would just go into the office hungover. Sometimes I would drink more to cope with the hangover. Sometimes I would do more coke. Like that was just my life for a long time. And
How
then
long we talking that you're in that sort of cycle?
from 20 to 29.
And how were you feeling at that time? Because obviously, I know it's easy when you've got like the awareness you've got now to look back. But
Yeah.
when you were actually going through it at the time, were you
Yeah.
aware that there was something missing, or did you just kind of think that that's what life is? Because I feel like for a lot of people, because if you look at the mainstream movies and stuff, you have a bad day
Mhm.
at work or you're stressed, alcohol, drink,
Mhm.
party, drugs.
Mhm.
So did you just
Mhm.
sort of think this was normal, or were you very aware that, do you know what I mean, like you were kind of sinking and were just still cracking on with it?
I think for a long time I thought it was normal. But there was definitely still a degree of shame to it. Like I hid my cocaine addiction from a lot of people just because, alcohol, everyone accepts it. Cocaine is, some people accept it. Some people are like, whoa, you're a hard drug user. And so, yeah, like that I kept hidden. Um, but the heavily drinking part, like for the most part, everybody else was doing it too.
Mm.
Until I started to get into my late 20s, like when I was about 28 or 29, then my friends were starting to come out of that phase, and I was still very much in that
Mm-hmm.
phase. And they were starting to get concerned, and they would have like talks to me about it, like, how much longer do you think you're going to be doing this? And then I would always just be like, oh, I'm only doing coke like once a week now, and it's not an everyday habit anymore, it's just a weekend thing. So like I'd always brush it off. um the drinking, I think I kind of knew that it wasn't normal to be drinking heavily every day, but at the same time I'm like, well, I'm not exactly showing up hungover at work. Like at that point, my tolerance was so high
Mm-hmm.
that like my norm was to be at least two drinks in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was grumpy if I was sober, but I didn't attribute that to the alcohol messing with my brain. I was just like, that's just the norm because it had been the norm for like a decade.
Mm. What about
And
your
then
partner at the time? Did your partner notice as well, or was he into this stuff as well? Had he noticed like where your head was at? Had he seen a decline in you, or was he just kind of like none the wiser?
he he's like my partner in crime. So whatever I'm doing, he'll do. So if I'm like, we're drinking, he's like, okay. And if we're doing coke, like, okay. And then if I say I'm stopping for however long, he's like, okay. Like he's just very supportive. Even now that I'm not drinking, like he won't drink around me at all. Um, so I mean, we've been together for 14 years. Like I think he's just always been like a very supportive, almost like passive in some ways. Like he's just very aversive to conflict because of his upbringing and the trauma in his childhood. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't the healthiest at times, right? Because we're both spiraling together.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm just very curious because obviously you've got again two people that are in that situation. Because I'm also whenever I'm doing these episodes, I'm always thinking like my audience, there might be in the situation that you were in. And then they're thinking like, oh, well, what's the partner saying? But then if you're saying, oh, the kind of partners are enabling it, you're kind of both doing it together.
Yeah.
But then the fact of obviously he will support you of them when you kind of becoming sober as well. Like that's again, it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because when you're in it, it's not great. Then equally when you come out of it, it is great because the support is there. So again, that's fantastic. And then what then led you to sort of going down this sort of like holistic path? holistic path that you went down? Because obviously you sort of mentioned that your friends had kind of all moved out of that phase. You were kind of still
Mhm.
heavily in it. So at what point did you kind of snap out of it or realize that this kind of was a problem and it kind of needed addressing?
Um, Two things happened. One, I lost my two bestest friends all at once, due to my drinking and drug use. We didn't talk for a full year. And I was so stuck in like my victim mentality. I was like, oh, screw them. Like, they're just not good friends. Um, and and it took me a year for me to finally call myself out on my own bullshit. I was like on a walk with my dog and I'm like, wait, what if this is my fault? Like, what if I may have caused some or most of this? And then the other thing was my sister, she's 8 years younger than me, and she was quite clueless as to what was happening, but she noticed when I would just do like a personality switch. And she would get uncomfortable, like increasingly uncomfortable, until one time she just like told me that I don't want you around my friends because you act like this, and this. And I was like so floored because she's like my pride and joy, right? Like I practically raised this child.
Mm.
And so for her to say that to me, I felt so much shame. And I was like, okay, something needs to change because I cannot have the person who I love the most in this world be ashamed of me. So that was like a huge wake up call for me. And I was like, something needs to change. I want to start at least cutting back on the drinking, cutting back on the coke. I did like 100 days of sobriety when I was, I think, 30 or 31. Yeah, around there. And then, I was like, okay, I'm cured. So I'm safe to be like a moderate drinker now. And I remember as soon as I had that first drink, I could notice in myself a personality change.
Oh, so you
Like
actually
right
noticed it.
away.
You noticed it that time. Yeah.
Instantly, like the quality of thoughts, because I had 100 days of no coke and no alcohol. Um, yeah, my brain had felt like lighter, my mind had felt lighter and just like happier.
Mm.
And I was at this dinner with my husband and I was like, oh, finally, like I made 100 days. I'm gonna have a cocktail to celebrate. And within that first few sips, I immediately felt this lowering of like my vibe and energy. Like suddenly I felt more judgmental. I felt a little bit like just more on edge, a little bit more grumpy, almost like I'm looking for something to get upset at.
Mm.
It was so profound. And yet I was like, maybe it was just a one-time thing. And I kept drinking and increasingly it got worse and worse and worse again. And the cocaine came back in and that's when I realized,
Did you
okay,
introduce the cocaine for the first time, and then like in Ireland, and then the second time there with your husband? Did the cocaine come in when the initial effect of the alcohol wore off? Meaning that obviously you originally in Ireland took the alcohol to give that sense of confidence. When you
mhm.
kind of lost that sense of confidence, like you didn't notice it was giving you that buzz, was that then when cocaine came in to give you that extra sort of kick, or did it just happen to be you were at parties, it was there and you took it, or was it an intentional usage to give you an extra boost of confidence?
It was the extra energy because, like, if you drink at a point in the night, you're going to get tired and sleepy, and the cocaine just helps you keep going, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And for sure, it gives you extra confidence as well. And, like, you're just happy and everything's great all the time. If I had a bad day at work, I knew that as soon as I went home and had that first line, everything would be right as rain. So it was just such an easy fix to all of my problems, or so it
Mm.
seemed, right? Yeah.
So then what then led you to becoming sober the second time then? So obviously you kind of 100 days sober,
hmm
have that first drink, and then it gradually goes downhill again. At what
hmm
point did you then snap out of it that second time?
COVID. So I had been doing yoga for about 6 months when COVID hit in March 2020. And at that point, once yoga had been introduced into my life, I was starting to spend more and more quiet time by myself, like at least that 1 hour per day where it was like quiet time with myself. And because I had that, I started noticing like things that maybe my heart had been like longing to say to me that I had just silenced for a long time with drugs and alcohol. So I was starting to hear that voice already. And then when COVID hit,
What kind of stuff is it saying, if you don't mind me asking? Like, because in that situation, I've had that before where, again, obviously, I know there's, for me, in the West, the typical thing of yoga for people like me back in the day is just, it's just stretching. So people don't really understand the whole mindfulness practice and engaging with yourself and having that kind of meditative practice within it. So obviously I'm a big advocate of meditation. It's something that I do regularly. So when you kind of got into that state where you quietened your mind and then you're sort of saying that your heart was talking to you, can you try and explain that to the listeners that may have no idea what you're talking about, thinking, what do you mean your heart started talking to you? Like, obviously I understand what you mean because I've had those experiences, but what kind of stuff was coming up for you in that moment when you're actually with yourself in that stillness?
Yeah, I have to thank my yoga teachers. I found a studio where they weren't just teaching the poses. So there was one class, this always sticks out in my mind, where at the opening meditation, she said, okay, for today's mantra, when we breathe in, we're going to say, I love myself. And when we breathe out, we're going to say, exactly as I am. Mm-hmm. And as soon as she said that, I started crying. I was like, I can't say that. I don't fucking believe that. How could I? Yeah.
That's, well, for me, the most powerful meditations I've ever had was against a Buddhist center where I said I love myself. It's the first time I said I love myself, I think, ever in my life. But because I said it and I meant it, I just burst out crying, like uncontrollable tears. And that's the thing for me where a lot of people say to me, I can't meditate. I can't turn my brain off. And I'm like, the point isn't to turn your brain off. The point is to just let yourself just be, and you'll see the chaos that's kind of going on. And the more you sit in that chaos, the more it just settles down. And for me, it's just like the way I describe the analogy is like you've got misty water and it's just spinning around. Once you just let it settle, you can actually then start to see to the bottom and see what's kind of there, and you start to unpick some of that chaos that's in there. So I imagine for you then it's quite liberating when you kind of had that realization that, wow, like I can't say that. Like, so how did you kind of navigate through that?
Well, I mean, coming to that realization was really hard because then it forced me to ask myself, well, why the hell not? Like, why not? And it made me realize that there were a lot of parts of my life that wasn't working for me, and I had just been scared to change or to let go because we tie so much of our identity to the things that we do. And like I said, my husband and I had been together since we were so young, and I was like, if I start changing things, what is this going to mean for us? Like, will he still love me if I change? Even with stopping drinking, so much of our life together had been drinking and partying together. Date nights is like, let's go bar hopping. And I was like, what is that going to do for us? What's that going to do to our marriage? And these were all like really scary questions that I didn't want to look at, but it obviously wasn't working for my body anymore. Like, I was feeling really run down from our lifestyle. So yeah, when COVID happened and we didn't have to, like, I didn't feel obligated to fill every weekend with partying and going out with people anymore. I was like, this is like a huge opportunity to really try to not do cocaine anymore because it's been part of my life for 14 years. I would really like to kick this habit now. Like, I'm so done with this shit. I mean, the depression that it causes, right? Like the come downs, they were getting worse and worse and worse. I used to be able to counter it with like working out or like I was just when you're younger, you just recover quicker, right? But I was in
Yeah.
my 30s and I wasn't coming out of it. Like the only way to come out of the come down was to do it again.
Yeah.
And I was seeing that and I just didn't want to keep repeating this cycle. Like I wanted my life to look different. And um, having yoga there was like now looking back, I see that it filled the void where previously when I tried to quit Coke, there was nothing to fill that void. So eventually it's like, well, what else am I going to do that's going to make me feel good? I'll
Mm.
go back to drinking and Coke, right? But now I had this thing that actually made me feel good, gave me more energy, actually alleviated my anxiety and pulled me out of depression. And the more I did it, the better it got. It was the opposite with cocaine, which was the more I did it, the worse it got.
For me,
So,
I think you said something that's really, really powerful because for me, that's where people really struggle is when they're trying to with the addiction. With any addiction, obviously, there's different degrees of it, but a lot of it is they've got nothing to replace it with. So, as I
yeah,
said, once they stop, there's like, well, then what? Like, what do I do now? But for me, the fact
exactly.
of you found that thing that ticked
Hmm.
all the boxes, and then not only that, it sounds to me like it really put you in a position where you could be with yourself for the first time and then actually build that self-confidence that you'd been lacking in the first place that kind of led you down that path back way back when. Because for me,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things for me when I'm working with people do anything not to spend time with themselves.
Hmm.
And then is it any wonder why you don't have self-confidence or you lack self-esteem? Because you don't even like spending time with you. So you think
Hmm.
that everyone else thinks the same way about you because we don't,
Hmm.
other people see us how we see ourselves. So if we're
Hmm.
lacking that self-confidence, walking around on a subconscious level thinking that we're not worthy of
Hmm.
anything and we are weird and we are outsiders,
Hmm.
actually to just sit with yourself and kind of address that and realize that and actually work through it in this yogmatic practice, like that must have been
Hmm.
quite like rewarding for you as well.
Oh gosh, it's it's changed my life. Like, you know, talking about rewards, before the only dopamine I was getting was from drugs and alcohol, right?
Mm.
And now it's like real dopamine. Um, I think the best part is becoming a yoga teacher and you get to spread that healing to other people. Like, this is what it did for me. I know this can do it for you. Like, you might not be addicted to the same things, but everyone's addicted to something because everyone has a part of themselves that they don't like. And the addiction calms it, it takes the pain away, it's comforting, it's soothing. Um, And then what yoga does is it teaches you to find the soothing within yourself.
Mm. I love that. For me, there's a quote when I was at my lowest, and I was at school earlier on today, and I said it, which is why it's fresh in my mind. And I said that when you search for light externally, you run the risk of ending up in darkness. When you realize that you are the light you've been searching for, you'll never end up in darkness again. And that for
Yeah.
me is just one of the biggest realizations that I had when I was struggling is that I was searching for this happiness outside of myself. And
Yeah.
that's why the light could be turned off at any point. But once I kind of realized I was the light I was looking for, then only I can ever turn that off, which why would you?
Hmm.
So for
Hmm.
me, it's a beautiful thing of sort of realizing that. I just want to sort of touch in on something you said as well there about a lot of people are addicted to something. Again, whatever that may be for them. Again, it could even be phone scrolling now, which again is an addiction, dopamine addiction, as we just spoke about.
Hmm.
How do you kind of help people navigate through that? Because a lot of people are very unaware of kind of what's
Hmm.
going on. And as we know, that's kind of what's holding them back. Like they've been anchored to these, again, less than optimal habits that are leading them down a negative path. How do you kind of make people become aware of these things, which they may be completely clueless of?
Well, I don't make them do anything, right? My coaching sessions do comprise of yoga and meditation in them for the exact reason that they come to realize it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Once you present someone with an opportunity to be still and to rest, the answers come so quickly, right? The only
Yeah.
reason that we feel lost is because we keep drowning out our own voice. And the world, like, there's always going to be distractions, right? Our phone is like the biggest distractor of all time. Um, and you can easily let the hours pass by like that, or you can choose something different for yourself. Like, how present do you want to be in your own life? That's a choice. And your degree of happiness, your degree of success, your degree of peace all relies on you making that choice. That's it.
I love what you said there as well, like you don't do anything. It's a real key thing. Like I always say to my clients, I'm very well aware of the part that I play in it, but I'm like, I have done nothing. Like I'm not inside your head. I cannot make you do anything. Like you have to do it yourself. Like again,
Yeah.
that old saying, you can take a horse to water, you can't make it drink. It's like, no, you literally have done it. Like I've just kind of created the opportunity and the pathway for you to actually get there. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you then work with clients? Obviously, I know you sort of mentioned there with the yoga and the meditation and such, but what kind of people do you work with? And what kind of stages in their journey do they tend to be at? And what
Mm-hmm.
kind of journey do you take them on to kind of help them get out of this mental prison that they've put themselves in?
Yeah, my clients come from like such diverse backgrounds, and the things they're struggling with, I think on the outside, on paper, it seems quite different. But then I've noticed that it all narrows down to one thing, is that number one, they feel incredibly exhausted. And that exhaustion has led to either illness or some other kind of like traumatic event in their life. And now they're like, okay, it's time to look for some answers. I can't keep going on like this. Um, and then number two is they all feel incredibly isolated. So whatever they're going through, they don't feel like anybody else can understand. They don't feel that there is connection around them. Even if they have a spouse or they have kids, there's almost like this bubble that's separating them and their real life, I want to say. Um, and it boils down to the fact that they are so concerned about the happiness of others that they're willing to sacrifice themselves in order to get there. And it's a vicious cycle of, okay, whatever you want. Okay, I'll just do what you want to make you happy. And then their needs aren't getting met. They don't know how to voice their needs. And they end up feeling resentful. And then they isolate themselves even more. Like, oh, well, what is the use of speaking out? No one's going to hear me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So this is like kind of the common vein that I found in basically all of my clients. So the practice that we do is really getting so quiet with yourself that you're able to see that this is the recurring pattern. How do you want to change this pattern? What are some action steps, like small action steps that you can take that start getting you to feel like you have some agency in your life? You can make choices that make you happy, and you can see like proven results that when you do this, it doesn't destroy your family. They're actually happier because you're happier.
Yeah.
And it starts to end that cycle.
For me, I think there's a lot of people that kind of, like you said, the energy thing. For me, all I was thinking there was that old thing where you can't pour from an empty cup. And essentially what it seems like is that when people come to you, they are so drained because they're just giving again through like a boundaries and all that sort of stuff. And again, potentially that whole that people pleasing where again, they just want people to like them. So they just give themselves to the people and they're just drained, they're exhausted. And kind of what they need to realize is that you are worthy of having some of this energy yourself. And actually, if you just show up and help and serve these people that you love and are close to, you have to look after yourself first, like they say on the airplane. Put your mask on first and then put on everyone else's. So it's almost like putting themselves first, maybe for the first time, which I then can imagine is quite a scary experience for some people as well. Because going back to what you said and your experience about the identity shift, where I imagine a lot of people then get scared, well, what if I don't show up as this old version of me? Will this new version of me be accepted? So is that something like a common problem that you have with people where you're kind of like getting them out of this rut? This sounds a bit weird to say, but they almost feel like they want to be back in that rut because they know how to control it. Does that make sense? Where some people love, like they like to stay in that misery sometimes because it gives them something to moan about, the connection with other people. People know what they are when they're like this. And when they're kind of
Mm,
coming out, they kind of don't know
mhm,
how to show up as this new version of them.
mhm, mhm. And like as you're repeating this all back to me, it another thing that I've come to realize is that I attract these types of clients because this is what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
Like we teach what we most need to learn.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly it. You nailed it.
For me, it's the there's one of my mentors said to me, "You're best equipped to serve the person that you used to be."
Yeah.
So kind of because again, you can literally relate to them, and again, you can sift through all their BS because it's all the same BS that you were saying to yourself. And they're almost like, "How
Mhm.
do you know?" It's like because I was you. It's like
Yeah.
I'm literally talking to myself. It's like you can't
Yeah.
bullshit me. It's like I've been there, and it's one of the biggest things when you can actually call people out on some of their stuff. It's like, mate, like I've been there. Like just stop it and like, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
so
It's
so so.
it's pretty
Oh, sorry,
cool.
Karen.
It's pretty cool seeing like when someone comes out of a meditation and they're like, "Holy shit, I just realized this."
Mm.
And you're like, "Okay, let's go from there."
Because for me, we already know what we're doing and why we're
Mhm,
doing it. We just don't give ourselves the opportunity to listen. And like you said, as soon as you silence it down, it comes in. But
mhm,
I'm interested in this where yoga comes into it because, again, I don't for a single second claim to be a yoga person. I've maybe done
mhm,
3 yoga things in my entire life, and I just realized I wasn't flexible enough. I now know that's not the point of yoga. But
mhm,
let's just talk to guys like me who, again, love
mhm,
the gym. They're like, no, I'm not doing yoga. It's for wimps, blah, 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 blah. But they are feeling struggle. They are feeling stuck. They are feeling low on energy and they are feeling like something needs to give. How would you convince someone like me? Like, how would you sell yoga? Because again, I really am not sure how yoga will help me. Can you kind of
mhm.
explain what yoga does and how it will then help me get that energy back and start to connect to myself again?
I think the main thing is that yoga gives you permission, permission to be and permission to rest. And a lot of guys like you are so accustomed to doing and striving and providing. They're like, permission to rest? What? Like, I don't have time for that. What are you talking about?
Mm.
So, so when they do a session with me and I'm like, literally, get into this pose and we're not moving for 5 minutes. That's it. You're going to be still for the next 5 minutes. I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, this is the thing we're doing. And the more you do that, the more you're telling your body that stillness is safe, that rest is safe. Like, you're not going to get in trouble. No one's going to be like, oh my God, Daniel, what are you doing? You're being lazy. Do you know like how long your to-do list is? How dare you? It's like, oh no, like that was really nice. This feels really good.
Mm.
Anything that feels good for your body, you're naturally going to be inclined to do again.
Mm.
So it sells itself.
Is it an instant thing? And what I mean by that is, after one session, will you feel the benefit of just taking that pause, taking that breath, and just being still?
Yes. The definitive answer is yes. I had one guy just say to me, he's like, I don't think my mind's ever been that quiet. Like, he was stunned. He kind of just like sat there stunned.
For me, it almost seems like an active form of meditation. What I mean by that is that people don't like to just sit and like
Mm,
cross-legged or whatever their view of meditation is. So for me, this
mm.
almost seems like an active form of using your body to meditate in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, that's how I get into my body. That's how I got into meditation because meditation was so hard for me at the beginning. Probably
Mm.
like it took me until, yeah, I did my 300-hour training and we were just meditating all the time. And I was like, okay, I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
this. But at the beginning, like I could only do it when I was doing yin yoga
Yep.
because I could focus on my breath. I could focus on where in my body I was feeling the stretch or feeling the pose. And by zeroing in on just that one sensation in the body, then you are in the present. And that's all that meditation
Mm.
is like noticing that you're alive in this present moment.
I love that. What kind of meditations are? Yeah. What kind of yogas are there? 'Cause you mentioned there yin yoga. Well, so
Uh-huh.
what? Again, as a guy, or even a woman that's never done yoga before, there's loads of different forms of yoga out there. What are the kind of, again, you don't have to list all of them, but like what are the main ones and what should you kind of look out for? So let's say you are
Mhm.
like drained of energy and you kind of want this restorative yoga that's going to just take you back into your body and almost be a meditative mindfulness practice. What kind of yoga will help people with that?
So I'm primarily teach yin because of this exact reason. I want to teach people how to meditate with their bodies, how to get used to being still. And because it's in like 3 to 5 minute increments, it's much more doable than like telling someone, okay, you're going to meditate for the next 20 minutes.
Hmm.
That sounds impossible. It sounds like torture, right? You're like, okay, it's been a minute. But if you say, okay, we're just going to hold this pose for 3 to 5 minutes, then they have like an an end goal almost. So they know that there's a different posture coming next. So that, okay, I just need to breathe through this one pose for 3 to 5 minutes, and when you have that mindset, you can just drop in much quicker, and that 5 minutes is over before you know it, because you're just like, I really feel this in my right hip right now. um, and then the other two types of yoga that I teach are hatha and vinyasa. So hatha is more like you hold the pose for about 5 breaths, maybe 5 to 7 breaths, and then you flow out into something else. And then vinyasa is the fastest one. You hold the poses for about 1 to 2 to 3 breaths at the most, and you do a lot of sun salutations in between. So that's like a very popular flow, or a popular thing to do in a flow class. That one people might regard as more of a workout, but because you're timing your poses and the transitions to your breath, like inhale, raise your arm, exhale, straighten your leg, and so on, that also becomes a meditation in itself. So it really depends on what your body is feeling like it's needing that day. Um, Yin is my favorite though, because it taught me to be still, and then that changed my life.
Well, I think for me that vinyasa, that sounds like the one that I've done before, where it's kind of like just in then out and sort of moving with that flow. Whereas actually for me that yin yoga sounds more up my street, because like I said, I'm not against yoga. I've just never really done much into it. Like I'm very happy to just sit and meditate. Like that's my
Mm-hmm.
vibe. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, I've always seen like yoga. So when and you coming on, I was like, well, actually, it's my opportunity to sort of get some coaching for myself. Like, well, which one should I do? So that yin yoga sounds fantastic. And again, something I definitely would sort of benefit from, and I think a lot of other people will, as you said, because it's like that end goal. So they're kind of right, we're staying here, and then move on to something else. So just chill here, and then we're going to move on. But let's sort of link it back into you again. How do you feel now? So if you spoke about how you felt before when you kind of stuck in this negative spiral, like where are you at now? Like what is your life like right now when you've got into this good flow? You're actually able to give back to other people. Like what's the difference now from past you?
I was reading some of my past blogs from a year ago or even 2 years ago, and even just seeing how I used to write, and I'm like, that is how my mind used to function. Like the level of anxiety and how much quicker everything was happening in my brain, like jumping from thing to thing. I was like, wow, that used to be me. What life is like right now, it's slowed down a lot. It's slowed down a lot. I started doing 10,000 steps a day with my dog in January. And these long walks have just like anxiety gone pretty much. I used to get really bad winter blues because here in Canada, just I'm on the West Coast, so it just rains and we get like 5 hours of daylight. So it was my first winter completely sober from everything, right? Like no weed, no alcohol, no cocaine, obviously. Um, and I got through it. It was much easier than I anticipated. And I think it has to do with the fact that I'm much more aware of what happens in my mind now. I just like there's this awareness where I know I'm thinking something, I know I'm feeling something, and yet I'm not actively participating as much anymore. Like I'm one step back from it, sometimes two steps back from it. Like this ability to observe myself and my thinking patterns rather than be caught up to it, feeling like it has control over me. And there's going to be days where I'm feeling something like deeply, right? Like last week was kind of an emotional roller coaster. But even in the throes of that, rather than pretending that everything's okay, I was able to just say out loud. Like people are like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, you know what? It's a hard week. Like I'm feeling it. I'm feeling scattered. I'm not like I felt a little bit burnt out. And I was like, I know that it's because I've been slipping with my meditation practice. I know it's because I haven't been doing as much yoga as I would like to. Um, so then even, yeah, having the awareness of these types of things and knowing exactly how to get myself back to where I want to be is really powerful. So I think that's the main thing is before I felt powerless, like I felt like things were just happening to me. And now the power comes from the fact that I know I always have a choice.
I think for me, this sounds like there's previously in the past, you sort of mentioned shame was a massive thing. And it seems to me now that even if you're not doing the things that you know you need to do, because kind of life's just sort of coming at you a bit crazy, that there's like no shame there. You're just like, oh,
Mm,
I'm noticing I'm feeling a certain way. It's
mhm,
because I haven't done this and haven't done that. And rather than then shaming yourself for not doing that, just
mhm,
that acceptance of, I'm feeling this way because I haven't been doing A, B, and C. And that's something I
mhm,
really try and work on with the clients is, again, that routine and basically having your non-negotiables. And for me, all non-negotiables are the things that you know, if you don't do them, will
mhm,
affect you in a negative manner. So for me, mine's reading and
mhm,
meditation.
mhm,
So if you take both of them away from me, my mental health just kind of nosedives. And everyone's got
mhm,
their own different thing, whether, again, it could be walking, could be whatever it is. And sort of you notice there that probably two non-negotiables, meditation and yoga, they weren't as solid. And then it kind of just makes you feel a certain way. But then the artist then become aware of it,
mhm,
not judge yourself, become aware of it, and then be like, oh, okay, that's why I'm feeling this way. And actually to have that vulnerability to show up and be like saying to people out loud, hey, this I'm feeling, because you said it before we jumped on this call, you're very open about your last week. And I do it when I jump on the radio. It's a room for the guys called the Circle of Men, and we go there every Wednesday evening. We just talk about men's mental health on the radio, and sometimes some of us are feeling crap, so we don't show up and pretend that we're happy. We should be like, do you know what? I feel rubbish this week, and then we basically just talk it out like we're supposed to be doing. But again, as guys, it's very hard for us to do that. So that's the whole point of that conversation: is guys being open and vulnerable like we're supposed to be. But there's something so nice about just being able to show up authentically as I feel really crap today, and that's
mhm,
okay.
mhm. Yeah, it takes the power away from the emotion and it brings the power back to yourself, right? Like I'm feeling this way, but like I know it's temporary. It doesn't really have that much control over me and doesn't really impact how I think or what I do because I can still make all the right choices and do all the actions that I know are ultimately going to benefit me tomorrow, no matter what I'm feeling today. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's the thing for me. That's what I'm trying to get people to that place where they, again, through this podcast, through everything I do, is just get people to that place of awareness where they can take back control. Final question for you, something I always ask my guests. I'm going to sort of spin it around a little bit, put a bit of a spin it for you. What advice would you give to people that are in the position that 25, 26, 27, 28, 29-year-old you was in? What
Hmm.
advice would you give to people that were feeling and kind of stuck in that cycle that you were in? So almost giving it, what advice would you give to your former self?
Yeah. Don't believe everything you think. Um, and reach out for support because people are really willing and open to supporting you. People want to help.
Yeah.
And I used to think that, like, oh, nobody cares. Everybody has their own shit going on. Like, I don't want to burden people more. Or I think there's also a fear of rejection. Like, if I go to someone for support, I'm going to get rejected. And that's just not
Especially if
true.
being vulnerable, especially if being vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
It's that massive fear. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and you know what? sometimes you might be vulnerable to the wrong person. That's fine. Like that happens. Like connection doesn't happen with everybody, right? Like maybe it takes time to find a group of people. Like it took me years to find the yoga community. But once I found people who I could trust and feel safe with, like that's life changing. And then allowing yourself to be supported, because that's also really hard to admit that we want help and that we need help, because we're not meant to do this alone, and we don't have to do this alone.
No.
We're all meant to share with each other and connect with each other, and when you tell someone the things that you've been struggling with, it gives them permission to also share the stuff that they're struggling with. You can help each other, right? Like I had a woman, she would come to my yoga classes and she would cry in certain yin poses. That just happens. Like your body just releases the emotion. And she would always apologize after. And I'm like, there's no need to apologize. Like when you allow yourself to express, it gives other people permission to express themselves. Because
Absolutely.
like, what bullshit is it that we think we need to be composed all the time? Like we're emotional beings. We're meant to be emotional. And then you let it out and then you go on with your day, right? It's keeping it all in that's the problem.
Yeah. There's that amazing book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it basically talks about how animals, whenever something happens, they just shake it off, like, and get it out of their system and crack on with the day. Whereas we don't, we just pack it back in on top of all the other stuff that we've kind of ignored, and it gets worse and worse and worse. It's like, no, just let it out, shake it off, and then we can go again. And I also love what you said there about when you sort of share your story or what you're struggling with, it allows other people to share as well. Because I cannot tell you the amount of times, and I go to quite a what's the word, like a rustic gym, like old school gym. The amount of conversations I've had with men just by sharing my story, because I can tell they're not okay. So I'm just like, oh, here's my story. And then their guard goes down and then they just blur out how they're feeling, like really feeling. And they're like, God, I've never told anyone that before. It's like, well, yeah, you clearly needed to. But by me just being like, mate, I've been there, I understand. Like, let's hear it. Just the release that they have. So I think that's such a powerful thing that you said there, Vera, is that actually by you just sort of sharing your story, where you're at, it then allows other people to be like, yeah, do you know what? I've been feeling crap too. Like, I'm fed up wearing this mask. I'm going to take that off. And yeah, I've been feeling rubbish. Thank you for letting me express this. Because then that weight kind of just gets taken off them a bit, that pressure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that. Vera, this has been a fantastic conversation, but where can people find out more information about you? So if people want to connect with you, if people want to work with you, do yoga with you, where's the best place for them to reach you?
My website is stillyoga.ca. So they can find out more about me on there. They can book a free call with me. And then if you go to my Instagram, Still Yoga Vera, I have a free guided meditation on there that you can download. I also have a free guide for 3 ways to meditate that don't feel like torture. So yeah, Instagram is Still Yoga Vera, and the website is stillyoga.ca.
Amazing. And as always, I'll put all the links down in the show notes for everybody to click onto that. But Vera, thank you very much for your time today. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. Thank you so much.